Men have been fighting over this land for 2,000 years, pausing only for a few centuries at a time. A few centuries to let the farmers and townspeople rebuild their homes and their lives before the fighting returned. And inevitably, each battle would start or end on the beach. These beaches were on the campaign maps of the Romans, the Vikings, William the Conqueror, Napoleon, but for their tactical rather than actual value. If, as Winston Churchill said, the Balkans are Europe's soft underbelly, then the beaches of northern France are Europe's brittle shell, the doorway in, or the escape route out, of the bloodiest continent on Earth. So it was, 40 years ago this week, June 1944, when the Allied armies, finally achieving air superiority and gathering together the men and equipment they needed to do the job, were ready to bring the war home to those who started it.
4 years before, the British were driven from Dunkirk. 2 years before, the Canadians were slaughtered at Dieppe. The Allied armies were eager to return to, in the words of most of the American troops, get the job done. Hitler and his generals knew the invasion was coming, they just didn't know when or where. The Fuhrer was sure the Allies would land at Calais, the shortest distance from England. He still believed Calais was the true site and Normandy just a diversion, 2 days after D-Day, and the lives of thousands of soldiers on both sides were probably spared because of his obstinacy, spared for a few months at least. Nevertheless, Hitler assigned Erwin Rommel, the best general he had, to the entire coastal defense. Rommel, initially appalled by the lack of preparation, directed all his skill to the creation of the Atlantic Wall, devising lethally ingenious beach obstacles and frantically building gun emplacements wherever he had the space, materials, and slave labor. By June 5th, when he left for his wife's birthday celebration back in Germany, the fortress was almost ready. Across the Channel, the Allies were almost ready too. They had been filling up southern England for more than 6 months. Thousands of British, Canadian, French, and American soldiers. Those with special skills, the Pathfinders, Paratroopers, combat engineers, Rangers, trained hard. The rest just waited. After one false start, the call finally came the night of June 5th. D-Day was to be the next day, H-hour the next morning at 06:30.
And that night, 2, 3 o'clock, I only heard Eisenhower give a speech and tell us what was going on. The guys always said to try to run, see. So after he was through, then I went down to the mess hall, and we had the best breakfast I've ever had. I'll never forget it. It was a dinner and a breakfast. Fried chicken, mashed potatoes, all that went good.
The order came down that we were going to go, and we went. They had big stacks of parachutes, and we had all, of course, all our ammunition. And we picked up our parachutes and marched out to the airplanes, and then laid under the wings for an hour or so. Said our last goodbyes to guys in other planes, and took off.
Among the first to leave and the first to arrive were the paratroopers, dropping into the blackness behind the lines long before H-hour.
But in any event, I ended up landing in a swamp, damn near drowned. And I was so livid with rage. You know, I'd trained for 2 years. This was the big show. And there I was in the middle of a swamp, and I thought I was the only guy in Normandy that was lost. And I was going to kill that pilot.
The paratroops weren't the only ones who hit the ground behind the beaches that night, weren't the only ones who got lost in the treacherous hedgerow country. Wooden gliders, 85 feet long, many of them built by piano companies, desperately sought open ground.
We had the poorest place that you could possibly, perceive, with posts and wires. They called it Hitler's asparagus field. I can't quote the German name for it. But they just weren't good, just wasn't good to go into. But usually you'd lose your wheels, and if you could keep that thing about 70 miles an hour before you went in with your load, because you were loaded, you had a Jeep in there and everything they could think of in it.
When we started shooting, right away, we felt better, you know. We weren't near as scared. And of course, we weren't even shooting at those guns that were shooting at us. And they kept shooting, too.
The fleet, the largest armada in history, arrived before dawn. Battleships like the Nevada, run aground at Pearl Harbor, refitted in Bremerton, were assigned to bombard the beach no matter what happened.
Our orders were that we would pull into this designated spot, which we did, drop the anchor, and if we got hit and the ship was going to sink, we were to pull up the anchor and run it aground and just keep firing. So that's a pretty scary thought, you know, because a naval ship, one of its best defenses is maneuverability.
The first on the beach were the combat engineers, there to remove as much of Rommel's handiwork as they could with a few sticks of dynamite under continual fire.
We got off there about an hour and a half before we hit the beach, but it was dark and rough water. And we'll forget that. Called on this web rope. Your feet hit the top. You want to let go. By that time, the barge was down, the ship was up. Try, why, I just let go and rolled. And another guy caught me, it was already down.
In the first wave at Omaha Beach were the Rangers, assigned to climb the sheer cliffs at Pointe du Hoc and take out the German howitzers they thought were above.
I looked at that damn thing and I says, oh, Jesus. And they were already firing at us before we even got close to the damn cliff. And you know, it's a hell of a feeling. You're going up there and you're saying, you know damn well you gotta go. And then suckers are up there, bang, 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 right down on top of you. I've got a little old spot across my hand where a German bayonet came at, and he missed. I didn't. Now I'm going to get mad. There was supposed to be howitzers up there. We climbed and there was nothing.
Throughout the day, wave after wave came ashore, the British and Canadians to the relative safety of Juneau, Sword, and Gold beaches, the Americans to bloody Omaha and Utah beaches on the west.
We didn't talk to other units. It was such a helter-skelter anyway before. I think it was about D+2 or 3 before they got everything kind of lined out and got the dead off the field. The American dead were picked up almost immediately. German dead were laying all over.
We finally got organized and we attacked across the Douve River one night. Got hit by tanks and oh God, what a night that was. I should have died that night. But anyhow, we secured the other side of the Douve River, and then the battalion went through us, immediately got hit by more tanks, which we promptly destroyed. A lot of young Germans.
I did see, like I say, several of those landing craft go up. In fact, I seen the bodies go floating by our ship. And of course, all you could see is odd. You know, talk about feeling lucky. We were about that time because we had been missed all this time. But as these bodies went by, all you could see was the heads. And when I first looked over, it looked like somebody had thrown a bunch of coconuts in the water.
And I stopped. It was the last damn time in all the combat I was in after that. I was in a lot of combat. I never stopped. Not in a firefight, ever again. But anyhow, I stopped and I got shot.
As the men fought across the fields, the wounded were taken back to the beach to get what minimal treatment was possible and necessary before boarding ships to Britain. It was in those field hospitals that the wounded came in contact with one of the least publicized groups to participate in the Normandy invasion, women.
Some of them were really, you know, really severely wounded. I'll say. Any bad facial wounds, arms, legs that needed, had to be amputated. Those who were less injured were quiet, usually didn't, complain or anything, just very quiet.
Were the men that came back through pretty happy to see a female face?
Oh, yes. Oh, an American, Oh, yeah. And the flyboys used to come and visit us when they heard there was a hospital around,
I'll tell you what I missed most on the beachhead. I missed eats. We had those lousy K rations. You haven't lived till you eat number 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 biscuits with those things. I missed milk. I missed meat, which we didn't have for years. I can't say the other thing we missed.
The damn MPs had, sidearms, and the closest they ever came to the front line was about 100 miles back. And here we go in as the assault troops, and we don't even have sidearms, and we're in parachutes you can't get out of. So, those are some of the things that even 40 years later, I'd like to...
I figured I was going to get it one way or another. I was only 28 or 9 then, and it didn't make a hell of a lot of difference. And
Normandy just took the heart and soul right out of us. Just absolutely, from then on, it was fighting with strangers mostly.
You say we believe in freedom. We have to pay for the freedom. And this is what we was thinking about. God was with us.
Omaha Beach, 4 decades after Bernie Radomski came ashore. If God was with them that day, it was a long time before he showed himself. In the beginning, all they had was each other. Robert McGandy remembers flying over Ross Olson's USS Nevada on his way to deliver supplies to Bob Broderick's paratroopers. Broderick may have come back through May Alms Field Hospital. And down on the beach, Bernie Radomski remembers watching Dutch Ellinger's Rangers trying to climb the Pointe du Hoc. Radomski's in Walla Walla now, where he's just retired after 31 years as an auto mechanic. Most of the others are retired and living in the Northwest too, like Dutch Ellinger in Bremerton after a military career. Don Corey was the police chief, Spokane's May Alm, a public health nurse, Bob Broderick, a Ford marketing manager. Ordinary people, extraordinary times. And like ordinary people, they tend to remember the best of those times and forget the worst. That means they remember England. And 40 years later, England remembers them.
Suddenly, we're all Americans here. Just like that.
As they did in 1944, most of this June's Normandy invaders are going by way of Britain. Like Bob and Mary Jo Littlefield from Portland. They have a special reason to celebrate those months in southern England before D-Day.
Bob was an MP. He was on duty in this hotel. And I wanted to go and call a taxi. And Bob very gallantly told these GIs to leave and let me call for a taxi. That's how we met.
It must have been hard to carry on a courtship, was it?
Yeah, it was a little bit rough, but with a little AWOL and one thing and another, I made it.
And so on June 3rd, the small-town English girl married the dashing American paratrooper. 3 days later, he landed behind the lines, and then she spent the longest month of her life wondering if he was alive. Bob says he's never had much trouble remembering their anniversary. Back then, they came by boat and were sent to southern England over the same rail lines now used by tourists on weekend holiday. And they went to many of the same places. Like Bournemouth, a resort city used to entertaining visitors, but not thousands of lonely Yanks with nothing but waiting and a little easy training to do.
The waiting could not have been so easy. At the very moment in their lives when they most needed the comfort and support of loved ones, they got warm, flat beer and entertainment, in places like that one, featuring stars they'd never heard of. That's when they could get into town. Most of the time, particularly as D-Day approached, they were locked away in camps and airfields in the middle of nowhere. So glittery Bournemouth came to them.
When I did the Eastern dance, we always had a volunteer from the audience to be a sheik. And of course, there was a terrific rush for that.
Betty Hockey was the producer and, as she puts it, the naughty one, of an amateur performing troupe that played in the military camps near Bournemouth. Here, at what was Holmesley Airfield, they performed on the night before D-Day.
The Star-Spangled Banner we started, and I'm afraid those 400 boys under that tent took it away. They sang it from start to finish, and we just stood there with tears in our eyes, streaming actually, and so were some of those boys, because they knew what was ahead of them, I think. I suppose we were the last people some of them saw. Must have been.
When they did escape the bleakness of places like Holmesley, the Americans headed for the pubs, like the Cricketers' Arms, the oldest in Bournemouth. Regulars still talk about the night the Yanks busted up the bar.
Cheers. Came back at me again, you say. I told you you have changes, everybody.
Billy Everett was 10 then. She lived right across the street, and she still does. But her memories of the Americans are much sweeter.
We used to hang out the bedroom windows, on summer evenings, and shout, "Got any gum, chum?"
Shout what?
We used to shout, "Got any gum, chum?" So the American soldiers used to come along and throw up chewing gum, candy, scarves, and money. I don't know what happened to the money. I think Mother confiscated it.
Bigger English girls got different gifts from the Yanks, a fact not lost on British soldiers, like Norman Everett, now Billy's husband, then a veteran of the Italian campaign.
We didn't resent them as British soldiers, but they were better paid than we were, they were better dressed than we were, and they had this glamour of the American film, because the girls thought they were all film stars. They always had cigarettes, they always had nylons, they always had chocolate. They were different people, and they hadn't had the beating down that we'd had over the years.
Time judgment, please.
Hard to starboard inside.
Hard to starboard.
And then one day, the different people were gone, sailing away from ports like Weymouth here to a place where their chocolate and cigarettes couldn't help them anymore. Today, Southern England is full of men searching for those pubs, those camps, those British families they left behind at the Channel so long ago. But the Channel, and what lies beyond, calls them even now. They are the last wave, and it is time.
I wanted to come back. It was kind of a pull to it, I guess.
They're all in their 60s now, not so old men who still won't be back again in 10 years. The last great wave to hit Normandy is here today. They've brought their wives, children, grandchildren, but when you see them on the beaches or wandering over the permanently battle-scarred top of the Pointe du Hoc, they seem alone.
I really don't know what I expected to see.
John Horrigan of Bellevue is one of them, walking on Utah Beach for the first time in 40 years.
I guess maybe all of the LSTs that were hit have been taken away. I think we were coming in down there for those, you see that pink sort of a house? I'm sure that's where we went in that way.
Horrigan has wanted to come back for decades to share with his wife Miriam that incredible experience he lived through.
And this beach here, Miriam, this beach here was so much easier than Omaha.
But like many veterans, he seems almost afraid of the memories and the emotions this experience is reviving.
And I went back someplace toward the beach, and there was a stack of bodies. It was more than a block long and about this high. Now, they weren't all Americans. There were a lot of Germans in that, and they just stacked them like cordwood. And boy, makes you wonder what in the hell people were made of. I don't even want to go in one of those things, do you? Or go up there.
But they did, because peering into old German gun emplacements is just one of the things you do on Utah Beach.
Can you imagine just coming off the wading in and facing those things? It seemed to me like it was just immediately that we were in San Mariglis, and yet it's 5 or 10 kilometers inland.
Early on D-Day morning, the paratroopers of the 101st Airborne Division landed in the town of St. Mary-Glise, into the middle of a German stronghold. A murderous battle followed, won by the 101st. They were finally relieved by John Horrigan's 83rd Division.
I was in Normandy for, well, until the 25th of July, and I was so scared all the time I never lifted my helmet high enough to scratch my head. You do remember something about it, but it isn't, it isn't clear in your mind. Of course, it was 4 years ago.
Does it seem that long?
Yeah, it does. It really does.
This is the Normandy American Cemetery above Omaha Beach, the final resting place for 9,386 American veterans of the liberation of Europe. John Horrigan didn't want to come here today. Emotionally, he preferred to see where he'd been, not where he might be, and where so many of his friends are. The people you've seen in this program come from widely different backgrounds. They really only have two things in common. 40 years ago, they fought on the beaches and in the fields of Normandy, and they were lucky. In their name, we dedicate this program to those who were not so lucky. As it says in the small chapel here, think not only upon their passing, but remember the glory of their spirit.
You go in there and you hope. If you're lucky and God's with you, you live. If not, you're across in a foreign country. That's about it.